Well, good morning and welcome to Elevenses. It's Sunday, 17th of January. This is show number 105, and it is at last a bright and sunny day here in London. So what have we got for you today? Well, we'll be talking briefly about Bajaj, who are now the world's most valuable motorcycle manufacturer. Ducati, who've suffered a 10% sales drop. We'll look at the story about UK motorists who will not be pursued for motoring offences post-Brexit, and exactly what that does mean. Well, a quick look at the Sondor Metacycle. And I'll finish off with something pertaining to New Zealand, where one of their safety campaigners, Allan Kirk, has said that riders need specially targeted survival training. And I'll ask you where you've heard that before. So settle yourself down for the next 20-25 minutes, and we'll take you through those news items. Okay, so we'll start with the Bajaj Auto story. Which motorcycle company is worth most worldwide? Well, if you guessed Honda, you guessed wrong. The answer is fairly obvious. Here in the UK, we're used to seeing the products of the Japanese big four: Honda, Yamaha, Suzuki and Kawasaki, of course, and the European manufacturers BBC, KTM, Ducati, Triumph and so on, and of course not forgetting the US bikes from Harley and Indian. But look a bit harder. As I've pointed out for quite a few years now over on my Facebook page and here on Elevenses, things are changing. Chinese bike builder Lexmoto was actually the top seller in the UK last month. And the giant Indian company Bajaj Auto is now estimated to be worth around $13.6 billion, which actually makes it the most valuable motorcycle manufacturer in the world. Now, Bajaj actually sold directly to 70 different countries. Most of those are actually in Asia, but they also own just under 50% of KTM. And so your KTM, your Husqvarna or your Gas motorcycle may not have Bajaj on the tank, but their affordability is down to the link with the Indian manufacturer. And if you've got one of the smaller capacity bikes, they may well even have been built out there in India itself. And it's worth remembering, of course, that Bajaj Auto have just signed a deal with Triumph to help develop and manufacture a range of low to mid displacement models, which are going to be targeted in the sort of 300 to 600 bracket. And they're aiming to sell those globally. And basically what they'll be doing is they'll be filling in the low cost range of motorcycles below the new Triumph 660 Trident. And that brings me rather neatly onto the second story, because Triumph's new focus on budget models is something that I have basically said that some of our European manufacturers need to think about for quite a while. And it's interesting because one of their major competitors, Ducati, have just announced a annual sales drop of 9.7% compared with the pre-COVID year of 2019. The article essentially suggests that the reason for the sales drop was because Italy was the first nation outside of China to be hit hard by coronavirus, and Ducati were one of the first factories to shut down. But there's rather more to it than that, I think. The analysis that I read stated this: though there have been tales of strong recovery in the motorcycle industry as two-wheelers emerged as one of the key frontline and self-isolating modes of transport in the midst of coronavirus, brands at the premium end of the market that don't offer low displacement models were always expected to post more sizable drops. Triumph being a company with nothing in the way of small capacity inexpensive motorcycles, hence the new link with Bajaj. And Ducati are a second case in point. Over the last few years, the company's focus has very much shifted away from affordable transport to targeting expensive niche market machines. Their best-selling model is the Scrambler, and in the UK that costs almost £13,000. It's easy to say that a 26% growth in sales in China represents success, but the article also says that their new Street Fighter V4, which they claim was a successful model, sold just 5,490 units globally. So let's go back a few years. It's the bike that relaunched the company. Now, you may remember that in the late 80s, early 90s, Ducati were in serious financial difficulties. They had, as I recall, filed for a protected bankruptcy, which meant they could carry on trading, but they were protected from claims by their creditors. And one of the paths by which they actually got themselves back into on a sound financial footing was by launching the M900 Monster. Now, if you remember that particular bike, it was a cheap and cheerful parts bin special that appeared back in 1993. It was designed by Miguel Galuzzi, and it had a very simple concept. Galuzzi said all the bike needs is a saddle, an engine, two wheels, handlebars, and a tank to fill with fuel. And basically, that is exactly what he built. He put together a frame which came basically from the 888 Superbike, and he took the air-cooled engine from the range of bikes, which was the super sport models. And what came out of that was the 900 Monster. And basically what they did was they very quickly followed that up by using the other air-cooled engines in their range, which were the 600 and the 750 motors, and launched 600 and 750 Monsters. And this one here is the Monster 600 Dark. The 600 appeared in 1994. It competed head-on on price with budget bikes like Suzuki 600 Bandit, but with what was arguably a lot sharper styling, and that cachet of being a Ducati rather than a universal Japanese motorcycle. And the result was that the bike sold in droves. It was light, it was nimble, it was easy to ride. The 600 in particular was an ideal starter bike for new riders who wanted a machine with a bit of character. And they also appealed to the born-again market, which you may remember was taking off in the mid-1990s, as first of all, riders tried to beat the direct access scheme, which came in 1997 by taking tests on 125s. But also, once DAS had come in, riders were looking for bikes of a sort of similar size and capacity to carry on their development. And so the little 600 Monster really took off well. And of course, there were the existing license holders who also were getting back into biking at that time. And my brother was one of those, and he bought an M620 Monster after a 15-year layoff himself. So what was the result of this? Well, for 15 years or so, you couldn't actually move in central London without tripping over a baby Monster. They sold in shed loads. Over the next few years, the bike was refined, it was updated, but they kept the essential elements, the cheap and cheerful part of the bike. And by 2009, Ducati sold over 12,000 696 models, and it was the first of their bikes ever to sell over 10,000 machines in a single year. Overall, the various Monster models sold 300,000 units worldwide. And right through the 1990s, the second half of the 1990s, they accounted for somewhere around about 40% of all Ducati's sales. But where's the Monster now? Well, the answer is, of course, that it's been repositioned as a large capacity premium priced machine. The water cooling replaced the air-cooled engines, and that was all down to emission regulations. It was bound to happen. But they've also got bigger and bigger. The Ducati website says about the current 937 Monster that compared with the previous 821, it increases in displacement, power and torque. Yeah, okay, maybe it does, 111 horsepower. But going back to the old 600, which was that as I say, that entry model that pulled people in, 111 horsepower as opposed to 50 odd, 937 as opposed to 600, and it's priced at over £10,000 instead of 5,000. And the result is I haven't seen a single monster on the road. Right, okay, so don't forget you are watching Survival Skills Kevin Williams here with Elevenses. If you've got a comment, if you've got a question, add yours and I'll get back to you at the end of the show. We've got a couple of people saying good morning this morning. Paul is saying the weather's a bit better. Certainly is here, Paul. It's a lovely, lovely sunny day at the moment in London. Might take a walk out later. Nigel also says the sun's out and it would have been a nice day for a ride. It certainly would have been. Not too cold. It's about 7 degrees out there, I think. And Sarah says monsters get stuck in neutral. Well, yes, perhaps, but you know, the point was that that bike actually got a lot of people back into riding, and that's something that you know, Ducati basically. I think they need to think again along the same lines as Triumph. Right, okay, so don't forget the show is every Wednesday and Sunday at 11. If you can't catch it here live, you can head over to my YouTube channel, Survival Skills UK, and you'll also find a new safety video over there. My 60-second safety video has gone up on Thursday, so do pop over there and have a look at that as well. Right, okay, so last time out I talked about the new paperwork that will be needed every time we cross the channel into the EU, the old new paperwork, of course, that we didn't need when we were in the EU. But of course, press are desperately looking positive notes to Brexit, and the Telegraph has reported that speeding British drivers will evade fines in Europe after Brexit. And this is basically based on the news that the information sharing agreements about drivers who commit offences have ceased. You know, in fact, these agreements were actually strictly limited and they didn't cover every EU country. So you had to be a little bit unlucky to be chased back to your home address with a fine. The UK did bring in an agreement with France just a year or so ago, but obviously that's now out the window. But it doesn't mean that UK drivers and riders will be immune to getting nailed for traffic offences. Now, it should be obvious that many police forces across the EU can and will hand out on-the-spot fines, and riders often don't realise just how steep these fines can be until they are actually pulled up and asked to present their credit card. Penalties in France, for instance, range from £61, which you might think is affordable, to £3,360, which you may think is not affordable. The other thing that's caught British riders out on numerous occasions are the fines from going through a speed camera. Many riders have in fact got away with it, but if you are stopped for another offence, you can be hit with unpaid fines from speed cameras anywhere in the country for up to a year after the initial offence took place. And a few riders have discovered there's a real sting in the tail of French legislation on traffic offences. The French police can actually seize a vehicle if you've been caught at more than 50k over the speed limit. So think about that. That's 30 miles per hour. That means if you're doing 100 plus on a French motorway, 110 miles an hour, instead of the 82 miles per hour that is legal in the dry on a péage, you could have that vehicle taken away from you. And in extreme circumstances, the authorities can actually authorise a vehicle to be crushed as well, and that has happened in the past. Okay, so just take a look at this beast. If I can get the picture up on screen, there we go. It's a Sondor Metacycle. The basic premise is pretty much the same as we're getting used to: electric power, removable electric pod, as you can see there in the sort of under the hole in the frame, and the usual sort of motorcycle style front end and rear end. The only thing you'll probably notice seems to be missing is a seat. Um, I cannot understand why people are designing things like this. Do they not ride something like this to anything further away than a photo shoot? I owned an NX 650, put about, I don't know, 30,000 miles on it or something, before the engine blew up at 80 something thousand miles. And it was one of the most uncomfortable seats I've ever owned on anything, bearing in mind it was a road bike. The Husqvarna 610 my brother owned was possibly slightly less comfortable, but the whole point was that was a competition bike. The NX 50 miles was uncomfortable, 100 miles was virtually undoable. And the seat on this thing looks even less likely to be sort of bum supportive. So it won't be range anxiety about how far the battery will go on these things. It will be how far your backside can survive on it. And frankly, that nonsense perch on that bike looks to have a range of about 10 minutes. So, okay. All right, don't forget that I am still open for business. I may be locked down, but I'm not shut down. So I am offering online coaching. You can come over to my Coffee page and you can catch up with all the old shows over there, but you can also catch up with hundreds and hundreds of articles which I am steadily putting up from my old Facebook archives. £3 a month gets you access. I think what have I got up at the moment? I've got 2014 to 2016, so that's 300 better biking articles over there. So do come over and support me over there. Right, okay, and on that note, let's finish off with a sort of a safety based item. A motorcycle safety campaigner in New Zealand says that the high number of motorbike crashes is going to continue if specially targeted survival training isn't given to riders. In 2020, there were 57 riders killed on motorcycles, up 2 from the previous year. And Allan Kirk says motorcyclists are hugely overrepresented in road toll fatalities. He said there are also signs that 2021 could end up with a higher rate still, probably because of decent weather, but also big sales of motorcycles in New Zealand, because people were staying home and riding around the two islands rather than going overseas as tourists. Now, Alan has been in the motorcycle safety business for 50 years plus. And one of the things that he's pointed out is that overseas research, he says, shows that rider training currently used has very little positive effect on the crash rate. Now, I know that's a hugely contentious statement, but I've looked at the research which has been done on bike training, and what seems to happen in most cases is that there is an initial positive impact from bike training, and then the positive impact tends to tail off. There was an interesting study done in Australia where they basically put 2 parallel streams of riders through 2 different regimes. One got a training course, the other didn't, and they followed them for a year to see what happened. And they got pretty good feedback from both groups. Most of the people that they engaged for this study actually continued to report in. And what they found was initially the accident rate for the riders who'd gone through the rider training scheme were lower than the riders who hadn't gone through the rider training scheme. But after a year or so, what happened was the 2 rates of crashes actually leveled up. So in other words, what happened was that the effect of the training wore off, whilst the riders who were basically teaching themselves to ride were picking up the experience, having survived some crashes, needed to actually ride without too many more crashes. And basically this is what Alan has said, that he says basically that most riders are actually competent after a year. But the fact is, he argues that current training doesn't build on the skills that they gain. And And he points out that one of the biggest killers of motorcyclists is at intersections. Well, I'll come on to that in just a moment. He says basically that there is training you could offer that would teach motorcyclists how to position themselves in crashes, how to know what to look for, and what angles to go to avoid the car. And he thought that if these courses were offered, it would have a huge impact on motorcycle fatality and injury rates. And he basically says, you may remember a line along this, who was it, Kissinger, I think, who said it, wasn't it? There are things they don't know, and there are things that they don't know that they don't know. So basically, does any of this sound familiar? Well, it should really, because it's the same problem we have here in the UK, where motorcyclists are hugely overrepresented in crashes, particularly in fatal crashes out there on the road. And I've said exactly the same about the need for training to go on to address crashing rather than simply teaching people better biking skills, because it's no good having superior skills if you don't know how to use those superior skills to avoid making errors or avoid being caught out by other road users' errors. So this is exactly what I've been arguing since 1997, when I launched Survival Skills. And Survival Skills was called Survival Skills for that very reason. It wasn't a chance that I came up with that name. And it's based entirely on my experience as a motorcycle courier. 16 years I managed to cope with dispatch riding. And I went through that first year or so of the School of Hard Knocks and, basically developed my ability to avoid crashing the hard way. Now, I've pointed out, as I say, for the last quarter of a century, that we don't need to do it that way. We can train riders to avoid the standard crashes, but they have to have a grasp of where those crashes are. There's little evidence, sadly, that riders with advanced qualifications, for example, in this country, are any better at avoiding these standard crashes at junctions, on corners, and during overtakes than riders who don't take advanced training. So it is, I agree with Allan completely, that we have to rethink the way that we go ahead with bike training. If we gave riders a better understanding, some knowledge, if we taught them what they don't know, maybe we would start making some progress at reducing the prevalence of these standard crashes. But as I keep saying, go back to the 1950s, look at the stats, and you'll find that our grandparents were having exactly the same crashes out on bikes in the 1950s that we are now. My training courses, the work that Alan's been doing out in New Zealand, initiatives such as my Science of Being Seen presentation, which has been taken up by Bikedown, and we're just doing something of a review on that at the moment, actually. The New Zealand-based Shiny Side Up tour, which I've been engaged by in 2018 and 2019. These are initiatives that can reach thousands of riders here in the UK and also over in New Zealand. And they're a good start, they are a good start, but we have to keep pushing against this idea that if you learn better skills, you are somehow immune from crashing. You're not. You have to learn about crashing to be able to understand how, where, and why they happen, and then what you as a rider can do to avoid getting caught out. Right, okay, so after that little mini rant, that's it for today. I'll just close out with something that I thought I would never read, and that's this came from a review of the new 2021, I should say, Goldwing. The article said it has a sporty design. I'm struggling with that one, sorry. If you're a Goldwing owner, I really am struggling with the idea that a Goldwing is in the least bit sporty. I'll finish off with a mention for the new newsletter, which is now going out on Friday. I've already got quite a few sign-ups for that. The idea is to work around Facebook algorithms and basically to try to get past the problem of people not seeing everything that I write about. If you sign up for the newsletter, what you'll find is that it will be delivered direct to your email box. It's free to access, and you'll get the link in the email back to the original story on Facebook, which you should be able to access without any problems at all, even if you're not a Facebook member. Okay, so there's the link to the newsletter. Next one will be out next Friday. So that's it for today. I'll be back on Wednesday. Don't forget, you can catch up with the old shows, watch the previous episodes of Elevenses here on Facebook, or you can head over to YouTube and see them there, or go to my coffee page and enjoy them over there. All right, okay, so I trust you've enjoyed the show. Good to see people again. Look back in next time out on Wednesday. But for now, thanks very much for watching, and stay safe out there.